Warhammer 40k has been around for nearly 40 years, and with that comes a truly ludicrous amount of lore. With hundreds of novels and well over 20 factions, the setting has created a massive library of stories to be told. But aside from these stories, there are also a bunch of lesser known facts and pieces of information that have filtered in and out of canon over the years, ranging from hilarious to disturbing. 40k has it all. So here is 1 hour of useless Warhammer 40k facts. Warhammer as a setting was made with care and love by a group of truly enthusiastic nerds during the late 1980s, none of whom were above a quirky reference to popular media. Case in point, the first ever named Inquisitor in the entire franchise was, and brace yourselves for this one folks, Obi-Wan Sherlock Cluso. Yes, really. A fusion of Star Wars, Arthur Conan Doyle, and the Pink Panther, this magnificently ridiculous character was introduced when 40k was still finding its tone, and even by Warhammer standards, Obi-Wan was extra. He wore skin-tight power armor, he carried not one but 3 personal shield generators, conversion field, refractor field, and stasis field. If you shot him, reality itself had to check which effect went off first. And that's before we get to the arsenal. Pistols, digital weapons, and enough exotic tech to make a tech priest jealous. Obi-Wan wasn't just a psyker, but he didn't need to be. He was an expert investigator, a heresy hunter beyond compare, and the spiritual ancestor of every dour, overzealous inquisitor that came after. The galaxy is a vast and strange place, and over millennia, isolated human populations have evolved in wildly divergent ways. These genetic offshoots, shaped by the unique conditions of their homeworlds, are known as abhumans. Some abhuman strains are well known, like the hulking ogrins, sharp-eyed ratlings, or the squats, or kindred of Votan, whichever you prefer, but one of the rarest and most hotly debated are the Felonids. Officially designated Homo sapien hirsutus, Felonids are named for their supposed feline features, and their rarity has fueled both curiosity and exploitation. In fact, fake Felonid corpses, which are usually just human remains sewn together with animal pelts, have become a common but grisly black market item. But the truth of the Felonids is far less whimsical. These abhumans are confined to a single world, Carlos McConnell. They are banned from interstellar travel and forbidden from serving the Imperium beyond their home system, and there are whispers that their legal status as abhumans may soon be revoked, reclassifying them not as divergent humans, but as outright mutants. Erebus is widely regarded as the architect of the Horus heresy, the word-bearer who first corrupted Lorgar, who in turn led Horus down the path of damnation, but in a fitting twist of irony, Erebus was never even his real name. Born on the world of Colchis, the boy who would become Erebus was already showing signs of what he'd master later in life: manipulation, deception, and ruthless ambition. His parents scorned him for these traits, frequently comparing him to another child in their village, a bright, beloved prodigy whose name was Erebus. So the boy did what came naturally. He murdered the other child in secret, strangling him with his bare hands. Then he took his name, copied his facial tattoos, and slipped into the role. The deception was never uncovered. Soon after, he vanished from the village and joined the church, beginning one of the longest-running lies in the galaxy. During the Great Crusade, the Imperium clashed with countless strange offshoots of humanity, but few were as unsettling as the Olamic Quietude. This technology-obsessed race of transhuman purists viewed the Imperium as tainted imposters, claiming themselves to be the true heirs of Terra. Ironic given how they'd all but abandoned their own flesh. By adulthood, the only organic parts left of an Olamic Quietude citizen were their brain and spine. Everything else was replaced with machine components, giving the Mechanicus a run for its money when it comes to believing that the flesh is weak. Their obsession with what they saw as purity extended into every aspect of their culture. They had no faces, instead projecting shifting holograms. They operated on a mysterious social network that allowed them to analyze and counter the tactics of even the Astartes. In fact, when the 40th Expeditionary Fleet and the 3rd Company of the Space Wolves engaged this strange enemy, it took a brutal blend of stealth, heavy firepower, and raw aggression to bring the Quietude down. Before he fell to chaos, Horus led the Luna Wolves across the stars in the name of the Imperium, and one of his most bizarre campaigns came on the world 6319. Everything about it mirrored Terra. The layout, the atmosphere, even the local system and stranger still, its ruler styled himself as the Emperor of Mankind, complete with a golden throne and a silent elite guard, which these Terrans called the Invisibles. At first, the Luna Wolves were amused, until the false Emperor's bodyguards murdered one of Horus's most trusted captains. Horus gave them one more chance to explain, but when the second group of emissaries was killed, the war began. The Luna Wolves descended like a thunderbolt. The false Emperor's armies were crushed, and Horus himself stormed the palace and killed the pretender with his own hands. The event became a running joke among the Luna Wolves, with Captain Loken ironically saying, "I was there the day Horus slew the Emperor." Fenris, home of the Space Wolves, is one of the most brutal death worlds in the Imperium, and nowhere is that more evident than in its oceans, where something called the Kraken lurks. These monstrous squid-like predators are massive, stretching several kilometers in length, and are said to be the most dangerous creatures native to the planet. But whether they are truly native is a matter of fierce debate. According to legend, the Kraken was created by Leman Russ himself as a test of courage, but the Adeptus Mechanicus have another theory, that the Kraken are the descendants of a Tyranid bioform, somehow severed from the hive mind and left to evolve in the ocean's depths. Whatever the truth, the people of Fenris hunt them with nothing but spears and axes, earning fortune, glory, and respect from the Astartes who rule their world. In one tale, a dying boy who helped slay a Kraken was brought before the Space Wolves and rewarded with something greater than survival. He was given the honor of becoming one of them. While the Martian Mechanicum was the Imperium's greatest ally during the Great Crusade, some scholars and Imperial historians have long whispered a troubling theory. The Emperor was preparing for war with Mars. The reasons are obvious. The Emperor sought a rational, enlightened Imperium, while the Mechanicum was a zealous cult, worshipping machines as gods in direct contradiction to his vision. Their alliance was a means to an end, but it was never meant to last. And the evidence is the existence of the Emperor's most secret arsenals. The Legio Custodes and Sisters of Silence wield war gear so advanced that even the tech priests of Mars were never allowed to study it. Their forges hidden on Terra answered only to the Master of Mankind. Then there's the Leviathan Dreadnought, a towering war machine developed in secret on Terra. Some within the Mechanicum denounced it outright, claiming it was engineered to counter the god engines of Mars. Even more damning is the Exindio, the Dark Angel's secret AI weapons that we'll talk about a little bit more later. All things considered, it certainly looked as though the Emperor was getting ready to purge the last religious cult in his Imperium as soon as the Great Crusade ended. Before the rise of the Chaos Space Marines, before even the Demon Primarchs, there were mortals so brutal, so violent, that they caught the attention of the gods themselves. The most infamous among these was Doombreed, the Skull Lord, a monstrous demon prince of Khorne whose origins trace all the way back to ancient Terra. It's said that Khorne stirred for the first time during humanity's bloodiest eras, sometime between the first and second millennia, when warlords carved paths of destruction across Terra. One such conqueror was so ruthless, so utterly relentless in war, that Khorne chose him as his herald. Historians and lore masters have speculated about his identity, but nothing has ever been confirmed. After all, there were many bloody warlords in Terran history between the years 1000 and 1999 CE. Unlike the towering bloodthirsters he resembles, Doombreed was once human. In fact, he may be the first mortal ever elevated to demonhood by the Blood God, making him one of the earliest champions of chaos in galactic history. In the 41st millennium, Doombreed rides to war draped in a cloak of Space Marine skulls, leading entire legions of demons to battle. His true name is forgotten, but his slaughter has never stopped. One of the strangest wars in Imperial history took place in the 33rd millennium, and it all began with a single claim: I am the son of the Emperor. The identity of this so-called Primarch has been completely scrubbed from the records. Some say he was a rogue Astartes or a surviving Thunder Warrior, or even one of the two lost Primarchs. But whatever the truth is, his appearance sent the Segmentum Pacificus into an all-out civil war. 11 loyalist chapters sided with the false Primarch, and considering that one of the two lost Primarchs is reportedly the father of the 11th Legion, gathering this amount of chapters under his banner is an interesting coincidence. The High Lords responded by forming the Pentarchy of Blood, a brutal strike force made up of 5 of the Imperium's most merciless chapters. The Carcharodon's Astra, Carnal Guard, Death Eagles, Flesh Eaters, and Red Talons. With that lineup, it's unsurprising what happened next. By the war's end, not a single traitor survived. The truth of what really happened, if it ever existed, is now buried beneath 100 layers of redacted history. The Thunder Warriors were the Emperor's first great experiment in transhuman warfare. Massive, violent soldiers forged for one purpose: to unify Terra by force. Built for the brutality of the Unification Wars, these gene-forged killers were never meant to endure. Each one was engineered for short-term power and an even shorter shelf life, and by the final battle at Mount Ararat, official records claim they were all gone, sacrificed in glorious combat. The truth was far messier. Many Thunder Warriors survived the war, only to be betrayed by the Custodes in a calculated purge. Then the few who survived that purge thought it was a good idea to storm the Imperial Palace, which ended predictably when the very first Astartes army was loosed on them. The few who escaped that purge slipped into the shadows of Terra's underworld, living as mercenaries, gladiators, and degenerates. At least 2 warriors from that old guard survived: Tyranids, bearer of the Emperor's banner, and one final comrade held on for centuries, stabilizing their failing bodies long enough to see the galaxy burn during the Horus heresy. Not to be confused with the Necrons, Chaos has also fielded its own terrifying form of humanoid machines. These ancient constructs, plasteel frames powered not by circuitry but by demonic possession, are known only from the murkiest records of the past. Bound by the dark arts of Chaos sorcerers, these androids were vessels for demons who could not defy their orders, but who always sought escape. Though mindless in obedience, they radiated malice, forever clawing at the edge of their prison in hopes of breaking free. Thankfully, the secrets to creating these machines have been lost to time, or at least most of them. One known example survives, a dormant frame now held by a shadowy sect called the Disciples of Null, a cult of the true Mechanicum. The android's demonic essence has supposedly been purged, but the disciples are keeping it for a reason. Some whisper they intend to use it as a vessel to bring back their long-dead master. Roboute Guilliman's return brought many changes to the Imperium, but one of the most quietly disruptive involved the mundane protocols of Imperial timekeeping. After the formation of the Great Rift, time itself began to fracture. Warp storms caused entire sectors to slip backward or forward in time, while fleets emerged from the Immaterium decades or centuries apart from when they entered. In response, Guilliman implemented a new Imperial dating system to bring order to the chaos. But not everyone agreed. The Inquisition's Ordo Chronos, a faction dedicated to tracking and managing time anomalies, took issue with Guilliman's changes. They had operated in secret, attempting to catalog incidents of temporal distortion and suppress threats to the normal flow of time. To them, Guilliman's reforms were dangerous and unnecessary, potentially erasing or even rewriting history. Thus began the Chronos Strife, a hidden internal war between Imperial institutions over the very nature of recorded time. The conflict remains ongoing, invisible to most citizens, but deeply impactful to the Imperium's bureaucracy and scholars. Among the most dangerous artifacts recovered from extinct Xenos empires are the Halo devices, mysterious objects found in the Halo stars on the edge of known space. Their origins are lost to time, likely created by civilizations so alien that even the Adeptus Mechanicus struggle to classify them. Halo devices can take many forms, but they're usually small, harmless-looking objects. Whatever their shape, their effects are terrifyingly consistent. They alter the user's body and mind, granting immense physical and cognitive gifts, longevity, enhanced intelligence, cellular regeneration, and in time, functional immortality. But this power comes at a price. Halo devices are parasitic. In the first phase, they make subtle changes, mood shifts, creeping paranoia, hallucinations, that sort of thing. The second phase makes the user nearly unkillable, but also inflicts some unnatural compulsions: cannibalism, isolation, or even prolonged exposure to solar radiation. If killed, they could get back up again unless burned or surgically separated from the device. The third phase is where humanity is lost entirely. The host mutates into something monstrous, burning eyes, taloned hands, and armored skin, very insect-like in appearance. At that point, they can't even pretend to be human, and even death won't stop them. It's rumored that the remains of a Phase 3 host, bone fragments, or ash can be revived with human blood and an electrical current. The Inquisition hunts down all knowledge of Halo devices and destroys everyone it finds. To them, these artifacts are contagions. There is much to be said about Rabute Guilliman and his Ultramarines. They are renowned for their professionalism, unexpected moments of absolute rage, and above all, the Codex Astartes. But what if I told you that behind the polished ceramite, the tactical formations, and the impressive logistics, the Ultramarines like to break the tension with some corny dad jokes? Guilliman once had a stack of paperwork fall from his desk. When he found it difficult to retrieve it due to the oversized gauntlets of his armor, the Primarch sighed in defeat. Looking at his bodyguard, he gestured to the fallen papers and said, "Behold, my greatest foe." On another occasion, a squad of Ultramarines needed to make a spacewalk in order to board an enemy ship. As they set out from their airlock, one of the Battle Brothers was recorded saying, "We float for Macrog," instead of their iconic war cry about marching. Even their tech marines aren't safe. When asked about the inner workings of a malfunctioning system, one replied with a solemn quote from his Martian tutors: "The motive force is understood, but that which guides it is unknowable." Translation, we have no idea. And finally, we have Sergeant Dacius, who, after talking to Captain Sicarius, was thanked for lending his ear. In response, the wounded sergeant, who was missing an eye, asked his captain not to ask for one of those as he had none to spare. In the 42nd millennium, the Imperium fields starships the size of cities, each one bristling with weapons capable of turning planets to ash. But despite all that advanced technology, most of those weapons are still reloaded by hand. While rapid-fire weapons might be partially automated, the majority of shipboard guns, especially single-shot macro cannons, rely on thousands of human laborers hauling and loading ordnance the size of buses. Even Exterminatus-class munitions are loaded this way, with huge cranes and pulley systems powered by indentured crew instead of machine spirits. Why? Because in the Imperium, humans are cheaper than machines. Tech is sacred, rare, and prone to heresy if handled incorrectly. People, on the other hand, are everywhere and very expendable. Long before the 20 known sons of the Emperor were scattered across the stars, there may have been another. A prototype or trial run for the real thing, similar to how the Thunder Warriors were the first run at making Space Marines. Known as the Sleeper or the Angel of Destruction, this being was created by the Emperor during the Unification Wars on Terra. Its purpose was very focused, to help the Emperor in his fight against the demon prince Faragwayatla. The Angel was a towering figure, twice the height of a man, with great wings, a burning halo of energy, and a sword wreathed in blue flame. It brought ruin to all who opposed the Emperor, waging war with unmatched fury. But this divine power came with a flaw. The Angel lacked restraint. It destroyed not just enemies, but entire cities, anything it believed was a threat to its father. Together, the Angel and the Emperor pursued the Demon Prince across the stars to Karacephalon, where they sealed the demon within the planet's bedrock. But the Angel's madness only got worse. It scoured the entire planet clean of human life, leaving nothing behind. In that moment, the Emperor saw his creation for the failure it was. Using fragments taken from the defeated demon, the Emperor lured the Angel into a stasis coffin, intending to destroy it. But the coffin was lost on Karacephalon, buried and forgotten, until it was found again. 10,000 years later, the Inquisition reawakened the Angel to defeat its ancient foe once more. But after fulfilling its duty, the creature declared that humanity itself must be destroyed to deny chaos. Though it was eventually tricked back into containment, the Angel was able to inflict a huge amount of damage and now rests in secret inquisitorial custody. When Erda cast the infant Primarch into the warp in a desperate bid to save them from the Emperor's ambitions, it was a tragedy of cosmic proportions. Scattered across the stars, each child landed on a different world, alone, lost, and destined to be reshaped by their surroundings, except for one. Alpharius never left Terra. Raised in secret within the Emperor's court, Alpharius was tutored not by common mortals or planetary warlords like his brothers, but by Malcador the Sigillite himself. He mastered the arts of deception, infiltration, and misdirection, becoming the perfect weapon long before his legion ever knew his name. While his brothers forged bonds in fire and blood across the galaxy, Alpharius remained a ghost in the cradle of humanity, unknown, unseen, and utterly loyal, or so it seemed. Eventually, the Emperor needed to bring Alpharius into the light, and so a stage was set, a lost primarch discovered either by Horus during a campaign or revealed in the chaos of the Rangdan Xenocides aiding Lionel Johnson. But none of it may be true, because Alpharius told the story, and with Alpharius, the truth is just another tool. Wouldn't it be the greatest lie of all if just once he told the truth? Deep within the warp itself lies the impossible sprawl of the crystal labyrinth of Tzeentch, an ever-shifting maze of paradoxes, illusions, and dead ends forged by the Changer of Ways to trap and test both mortals and demons alike. At the heart of the labyrinth runs a single hidden path, a road that promises infinite knowledge for those clever or deranged enough to find it. But to walk this path is to pass through 9 gates, each sealed and guarded by the same entity, the Guardian of the Maze. This being perceives all 9 gates simultaneously, asking riddles drawn from a collection of 999, each question a puzzle that reshapes itself with every attempt to answer. Most are lost to madness or worse, but one challenger supposedly reached the end. She appeared as a young girl accompanied by a small black dog, very Wizard of Oz, and somehow answered each riddle in turn. The Guardian, clearly shaken, would later claim she cheated, but those who study the tale whisper a deeper truth, that this girl was never what she seemed. Some believe she was a powerful warp entity in disguise, a powerful psyker, or even the Emperor himself walking hidden paths to outwit a chaos god. Tzeentch, of course, remained silent, and the girl was never seen again. The Eversor Temple of the Officio Assassinorum is easily the most unhinged of the Imperial assassination orders, and the reason for that is in their approach to their missions. Where other temples employ subtlety and precision, the Eversors rely on pure, unfiltered carnage. To maintain this level of apocalyptic violence, Eversors are bioengineered and chemically enhanced beyond recognition. Their bloodstream is a cocktail of combat drugs so volatile that if they are critically injured, the resulting biochemical meltdown detonates them in a blast of searing plasma just to make sure the job is finished. While active, an Eversor is a blur of blades, claws, and aggression. They've been known to tear the head off a space marine barehanded, and that's when they are being efficient. Emotionally and mentally broken down, their instincts are cranked to maximum hostility. To avoid incidents, they are kept in cryostasis when not deployed, but with enough sedatives far beyond what would kill a normal human, they can be made relatively safe for polite company. In this state, they're still psychotic, rude, and twitchy, but just calm enough to info dump about their weapons, which they adore a lot. To be fair, it is the only positive relationship they have. The Imperium spans millions of worlds, and over 10,000 years of bureaucracy has refined planetary classification into a very specific science. In many cases, that means assigning one entire planet to one specific task. Need soldiers? That's what fortress worlds and feudal worlds are for. Need food? Welcome to your local agri-world. Want to bury saints in bulk? Well, there's a whole subclass of planets earmarked for heroic graveyards. But the real absurdity begins when you realize the Imperium also has planets dedicated to things like ink, paper, and wax. Take Scorpa, for example. A planet ravaged by storms of razor-sharp diamond dust would seem uninhabitable. But below the surface, its gigantic manufactorums are hard at work. Fed by a steady supply of corpse fat from across the system, its great tallow factories refine the dead into trillions of candles, destined for shrine worlds, churches, and endless bureaucratic rituals. Scorpa is just one example in a galaxy where planetary specialization is taken to such an extreme you wouldn't blink at a world entirely devoted to quills or monuments, because in the Imperium, if it exists, there's probably a planet-sized factory for it. The Emperor of Mankind has walked among humanity since the dawn of civilization. In the early ages of Old Earth, long before he forged a galaxy-spanning Imperium, the Emperor lived quietly, adopting countless identities, guiding the species from behind the curtain of myth. He was a healer, a prophet, a philosopher, a general, sometimes male, sometimes female, sometimes peasants, sometimes king. Though not yet the godlike being he would become after the Dark Age of technology, the Emperor's psychic strength and intellect already dwarfed those of any mortal, and through every life he pursued a singular goal: to shepherd humanity forward and protect it from its own worst instincts. One such life was reportedly that of Alexander the Great. Legend says that Alexander stood at the river Hyphasis and wept that there were no more worlds to conquer. However, that despair was short-lived because there, in the lands of the Indus, the emperor discovered the Golden Throne, or at the very least, the alien ruins that would inspire its creation far in the future. The Imperium's stance on artificial intelligence is simple. It's forbidden. The Men of Iron nearly destroyed humanity during the Dark Age of technology, and ever since, true AI, known as abominable intelligence, has been ruthlessly hunted and purged. Unless, of course, you are the Dark Angels. During the Great Crusade, the First Legion fielded a terrifying weapon, the Exindio-class battle automata. Though they appeared similar to the cybernetic constructs of the Mechanicum, the Exindio were something far worse. Crippled men of iron bound in agony and servitude. Despite receiving the Emperor's blessing, the Exindio were deployed only in the direst of circumstances. They hated all organic life, including their masters. Each one required a built-in failsafe, a kill switch, and could only be unleashed under orders from Lionel Johnson himself. So every once in a while, the lore masters of 40k will give us a fact so wildly hilarious that it almost defies belief. For instance, the Mechanicus uses the skull of Nikola Tesla, yes, the 18th century inventor of alternating electrical current, as a weapon. The skull of Elder Nicholas is one of the Martian priesthood's strangest relics. Said to come from a human born before the Dark Age of technology, it's been wired, sanctified, and turned into a sacred EMP. If the right praise psalm is sung, the skull releases a burst of electric wrath, shutting down enemy war machines with a crackling halo of divine static. Whether this ability is from the Mechanicus putting an EMP generator inside poor Tesla's skull, or a byproduct of the volts he absorbed over his long life of experimenting with electricity is unclear. Standard template constructs, or STCs, are the holy grails of the Adeptus Mechanicus, ancient blueprints from the golden age of technology, capable of building everything from las guns to automated factories. Most STCs known today are fragmented at best, their full knowledge lost to time and war. But some say there's one ship in the Imperium that holds a complete STC. That ship is the Speranza, an Ark Mechanicus, a vast mobile forge and warship. Like other Arks, it travels the stars collecting relics, studying Xenos tech, and scouting ruins for lost data. But the Speranza has a secret. It houses a fully intact STC, and no one aboard knows it. The machine spirit at the heart of Speranza is a sentient AI, a remnant of the Dark Age of technology. It's not just hiding the truth from its Adeptus Mechanicus masters, it's protecting its crew, even advocating for the rights of lowly menials. If the Mechanicus ever discovered the truth, it would cause a civil war in the priesthood. But if the Imperium ever unlocked the Speranza's STC, it could revolutionize the entire galaxy, from weapons and armor to agriculture and infrastructure, a future worth fighting for if anyone survives learning about it. The Avatar of Cain is the Eldar's greatest weapon, a living god of war born when a great Eldari warrior sacrifices their life to become the vessel of Kayla Mencha Cain. So when an Avatar was lost in the Octaria system, a war zone locked in endless slaughter between Orks and Tyranids, it was a disaster waiting to happen, because the Orks noticed. Specifically, the Overfiend of Octarius, one of the most dangerous war bosses in the galaxy, got it into his head to loot the Avatar of Cain. If he had succeeded, he wouldn't have just strapped on some war gear, he would have turned the Avatar into an Ork-powered murder idol, an actual Orkified war god. The result? Possibly the most powerful Ork in history. Thankfully, the Eldar of Saimahan and the Salamander Space Marines intervened just in time, stopping the Avatar from falling under the Overfiend's control, because the last thing the galaxy needs is an Ork with divine power and a flamethrower for a face. Genestealers can technically make hybrids with the greenskins the same way they can with many other species, and they sometimes do so if no other option is available to them, but the reason they are so reluctant is hilarious. Tyranid Genestealers wander the galaxy ahead of the slowly advancing hive fleets, acting as scouts and spies. They create small factions inside the potential target populations, ensuring that once the hive arrives, their prey will be so preoccupied with fighting the Genestealer cults that they won't be able to fend off the main invasion. And this mostly works, except with Orks. That's because pretending to be an Ork is difficult. The second an Ork Genestealer hybrid starts acting strangely, like spreading the worship of a many-armed god or suggesting that some of the lads organized to take on the boss, normal orcs immediately clock that something isn't right. But going even further, and this is really the orkiest reason that Genestealers stand out, they're just too calm. As soon as you mix orc DNA with anything else, they stop being so aggressive all the time, and that's a dead giveaway to the other boys. They'd probably get further if they just kept randomly throwing punches, I guess. Communicating across the galaxy should be impossible, but the Imperium has one very loud solution: the Astropaths. These sanctioned psychers are fragile, often blind, and mentally scarred by their bond to the Emperor. Their telepathy lets them send messages through the warp, not by words, but by raw emotion, imagery, and thought. A single astropath might manage a brief message across nearby systems, but for greater distances, it takes a choir. An astropathic choir is exactly what it sounds like: a group of psychers projecting a hurricane of meaning into the warp, literally and metaphysically screaming, chanting, and sobbing their message through hell. The longer the distance, the harder the strain. But an astropathic message is not always a two-way conversation. Emergency signals don't come as neat sentences, they come as nightmares. Receiving astropaths might wake up screaming, convulsing as their minds are flooded with visions of fire, despair, and death. Bleeding eyes are common, which means that there's screaming happening at both ends of the conversation. And of course, with how horrifying the receiving of such a message is, it's important to remember that the sender took on the majority of that terror, and the strain of screaming their message into the warp regularly leads to their death with or without help from a choir. Considering that the Emperor and Horus were both pretty terrible examples of fatherhood, it should come as no surprise that Abaddon the Despoiler is no different. What is surprising is that he did in fact have a child. As a Space Marine, Abaddon couldn't have children in the traditional sense, but what he did have was Dravura Morkath. Morkath was an artificially engineered human designed for one purpose: to interface with the Blackstone Fortress Will of Eternity and obey Abaddon without question. Her mind was seeded with false memories of being found as a child, rescued by the War Master of Chaos, and raised by him as a daughter. None of it was true. The memories were just another manipulation, a tool to ensure loyalty. But to Morkath, they were real. She lived only for Abaddon's approval, so much so that she even clashed with his lieutenants over who best served the Despoiler. Her story ended during the 13th Black Crusade, when her Blackstone fortress was crippled. Morkath pleaded for a chance to repair it, to turn the tide and claim victory in her father's name. Instead, Abaddon ordered her to ram the fortress into Cadia, and she obeyed. Still just grateful to be useful, while Abaddon just cast her aside. Father of the Year, for sure. It sounds counterintuitive, but the hive mind doesn't design its creatures for self-preservation. Most Tyranid organisms are built for a single task: kill, scout, swarm, burrow. And once it's complete, they wither away and are broken down by their hive ships for recycling. And so even though Tyranids are often called the Great Devourer, several bioforms don't actually have any ability to eat. The Gaunt breeds are a prime example. Spawned in vast numbers, they are meant to die, overwhelming the enemy and paving the way for larger, more dangerous creatures. Some bioforms are born with just enough stored energy to complete their mission. Then there are the Rippers. These scavengers do eat, but don't digest anything themselves. Instead, they carry the raw materials back to digestion pools or hive ships for reclamation by the swarm. Fenris is the death world home of the Space Wolves, infamous for its savage wildlife, including the monstrous Thunder Wolves and the massive, semi-intelligent Fenrisian Wolves. But according to Magnus the Red, one of the few people who would know better than most, there are no wolves on Fenris. While that sounds like a riddle or an insult, it's actually the truth. Sort of. Bear with us here. Fenris has a wildly unstable orbit, taking 3 to 4 Terran years to circle its sun. That means its seasons aren't just cold and warm, they are apocalyptic. The planet swings between an Arctic wasteland and a volcanic hellscape, which makes its wildlife some of the most extreme in the galaxy. The Fenrisian wolves are unlike any known species. They may resemble Terran wolves, but they are massive, highly aggressive, and exhibit levels of intelligence that should not occur naturally in such creatures. Most scholars suspect they are not wolves at all, but artificially created predators, perhaps descended from genetically altered animals brought by ancient colonists, or even something stranger. Some theories, especially among the Thousand Sons, suggest a darker origin, that the so-called space wolves of Fenris are actually humans twisted into beast form by ancient genetic tampering, or worse, failed or devolved space marines, their Canis Helix mutations going so far out of control that they become literal animals. This idea is reinforced by the existence of the Wolfen, space wolves who succumb to their inner beast entirely, becoming feral mutated creatures, more wolf than man. If such transformations are possible, then perhaps Magnus was right. The Sisters of Silence and Calexis assassins are among the most terrifying weapons in the Imperium's arsenal. And it's not just because of their training or equipment, it's because of what they are. Blanks, also known as pariahs or nulls, are people who are born without a soul. The absence creates an anti-psychic void around them, one that causes a sense of unease in normal people and sheer agony in psychers, as well as making them invisible in most situations. This isn't metaphorical. One Sister of Silence once described how people were so disturbed by her presence that their minds simply refused to notice her. And with powerful blanks, even electronic sensors and camera systems sometimes fail to detect them. Calexis assassins, the deadliest of all blanks, are practically ghosts. They are erased from perception and exist only to end the lives of psychers. We all know Space Marines are tough, but some of them seem downright unkillable. Sure, dreadnoughts are a thing, and there's also so-called miracles like the Black Templar chaplain Grimaldus, or stubborn Marines with more machine parts than flesh parts like Astarion Moloch of the Minotaurs. But we are talking about a true immortal, like Vulcan or the Emperor himself. Meet Anvil Thawn of the Grey Knights. Thought to be the last perpetual born to humanity, Thawn has been killed by greater demons and just sat himself back up mid-funeral. Where he comes from is a bit of a mystery. He was literally found waiting for the black ships to collect him, which is far more calm than anyone being rounded up by the Silent Sisterhood should be acting. But after a solid career as a warrior in the Grey Knights, he was elevated to the rank of Justicar, leading a squad into battle, which is when he died for the first time. The Eldari craft world Malantai had been overrun by demons, and while the Grey Knights were able to purge the continent-sized ship, Thawn died while fighting a massive greater demon of Slaanesh. After the funeral rites were completed, Thawn just woke up like he had been taking a nap. The Inquisition was naturally suspicious, but after years of testing, Thawn was returned to active duty, where he has continued to die and resurrect so often that his squad mates have just stopped questioning it. And he's not even that important. No glorious titles, no chapter command, no mythic relics, just a very tired Justicar who keeps waking up in body bags. For their part, the Inquisition and some Eldari leaders believe Thawn is possibly the last perpetual, but given that his resurrections have been subtly dropped from his canon story in the most recent codex, along with his stat line, it could be that GW has decided to finally let old Thawn fade into history. The Ashen Claws and the Carcharodon's Astra are two of the most feared Astartes chapters operating on the fringes of the Imperium. Both share a reputation for brutality and for taking what they need rather than waiting for official supply lines, including taking supplies and recruits from worlds the Imperium still considers loyal, and both chapters are often suspected of sharing a common origin. But while the Ashen Claws are shadowy and seldom seen, the Carcharodons, also known as the Space Sharks, have carved a name for themselves in blood, especially during the Badab War. Their chapter master, Tybros the Red Wake, is one of the most terrifying figures in the modern Imperium, and his signature weapons, twin lightning claws fitted with chain blades named Hunger and Slake, are nearly as infamous as he is. But according to the Ashen Claws, those blades aren't his. The two chapters nearly came to blows over the weapons, and even after fighting side by side against a Tyranid splinter fleet, the Ashen Claws demanded Gene Seed, war gear, and their relic claws back. Eventually, an Ashen Claw captain confronted Tybros directly, demanding he return Hunger and Slake, and of course, Tybros refused. The other captain warned him that he was outnumbered and that they would gladly take the weapons from his cold, dead hands. Tybros only smiled. Yes, they could kill him, but in doing so, the nearby Carcharodon fleet would unleash a barrage that would vaporize the ship they stood on, killing everyone aboard and destroying the relics forever. The stalemate worked, and the Ashen Claws continued to make plans to recover the claws. The Tau Empire and the Imperium of Man could not be more different, but in an ironic twist of fate, both civilizations have beliefs that seem to have created an actual god. When the Emperor founded his Imperium, he created the Imperial Truth, which outright refused the existence of any gods. Yet at the end of the Horus heresy, the Imperium was only held together by their faith in the Emperor. With the Master of Mankind wounded on his golden throne, he could not push back against this new faith and ended up becoming what he hated. The Tau, meanwhile, followed the greater good, a philosophy that promises harmony through rigid caste roles and mutual sacrifice. But while the Tau themselves are almost completely disconnected from the warp, their allies are not. From this shared belief, something began to stir. An entity emerged. Tauva, a warp-born goddess in the shape of a multi-armed Tau with a blank, featureless face. Each of her arms reflects one of the Tau Empire's major races. Her first appearance was subtle, saving Commander Shadowsun from drowning within a labyrinth. But during the Fourth Sphere expansion, when an entire Tau fleet was swallowed by the warp and assaulted by demons, the goddess revealed her true power, intervening and saving the survivors. Tau leadership initially cracked down on the goddess's worship, seeing it as heresy. But after Shadowsun's arrival during the Fifth Sphere, that stance changed. She was there when the Death Guard assaulted the Startide Nexus and saw Tauva appear, trapping the traitor Astartes in the warp. In the end, Shadowsun, one of the most pragmatic minds in the Empire, allowed the cult of the goddess to flourish. After all, whatever she is, she seems to be loyal to the greater good. The Leagues of Votann are known across the stars for their relentless mining operations and their deeply capital mindset. As descendants of ancient human colonists, technically abhumans, the kin are tolerated by the Imperium so long as they don't engage in outright heresy or hostilities. That said, things can still get awkward. During one particular diplomatic exchange, the kin prepared a lavish feast for an arriving Imperial delegation, only to realize a bit too late that their decor included several trophies taken from a battle against the Imperium centuries earlier. Chief among them, a dusty golden Aquila proudly mounted above the dining hall. To the kin, it was just some odd stylized bird. One crew member even asked if it was supposed to be a pigeon. Another suggested that since humans like to wear the symbol on their chest, maybe they should return the gesture. A third, less amused kin called it the Arkwil Ars and pointed out that hanging a sacred icon of the Imperium like a hunting trophy probably wasn't the best first impression. Their captain quickly ordered the hall stripped just in time for the delegation's arrival. The Aquila was removed, the Imperials were spared a diplomatic incident, and somewhere one of the kindred still thinks the pigeon joke was a missed opportunity. Chaos Knights are terrifying enough on their own, and the same can be said for Necron Flayed Ones, but what happens when the two join forces? The Chaos Knight, known as Deathsaber, is a deranged rampager draped in thick layers of human skin by the cultists who once worshipped him. Notice we said once worshipped him there. That's because a pack of Necron Flayed Ones, drawn to the grotesque sight of a towering war engine wrapped in flesh, mistook Deathsaber for a manifestation of the long-dead Catan Landagor the Flayer. They butchered the Night Cultists, claimed their skins for themselves, and began following Deathsaber across the star. Somehow, neither side has questioned this partnership. One is a corrupted chaos-worshipping war machine, the other a group of Xenos monstrosities driven by an ancient curse. United by madness, they've been rampaging together for over 2.5 centuries, leaving a trail of skinless bodies in their wake. Being one of the oldest races in the galaxy sounds great. They are immortal, powerful, and graceful. But for the Eldar, all of it comes at a cost, and for Farseers, the price is especially steep. Over millennia of channeling psychic power, a Farseer gradually forms a deeper connection with the Wraithbone of their craft world. That bond slowly begins to petrify them, until eventually, their body goes still, their mind drifts inward, and they begin to crystallize. When this process starts, the Farseer is moved to the Dome of Crystal Seers, a sacred hall where their transformation can be completed. Though it appears to be a kind of death, their spirit doesn't fade. Instead, their connection to the Wraithbone allows the Farseer's spirit to join the craft world's infinity circuit, protected forever from Slaanesh. No one truly knows how long the crystallization takes. Eldred Ulthran, one of the oldest living Farseers at over 20,000 years old, has only recently begun to show signs of the change, but once it starts, it's irreversible. Before the fall of the Eldar, there was a group of, we'll call them property enhancement enthusiasts called the Solar Cults. These decadent elites maintained their private realms within the webway by stealing actual suns from real space. These ill-gotten stars weren't needed for survival, just luxury. The members of the Solar Cults lit up their estates with them purely as a shining symbol of their obscene wealth and power. Even after the fall, these cults remained a force within the dark city of Comarat. But in the 33rd millennium, their hunger for dominance reached its peak and they declared war on the city's noble houses. Their opening move, turning off every sun in the webway. The resulting conflict, fought entirely in pitch blackness, raged for centuries. Dogfights lit only by muzzle flashes, ambushes in starless voids. Never before had the Dark Eldar been so aptly named. Eventually, the noble houses triumphed, restoring their control and the lights. No one knows how many lives were lost in the dark, but when one side is willing to snatch suns from the sky just to make a point, you know you're dealing with a different kind of war. The Eldar once had a full pantheon of gods, but when Slaanesh was born, she destroyed most of them. One of the last to survive was the laughing god, Kygarak, who continues to mock chaos from the shadows. His followers, the Harlequins, are performers, warriors, and prophets defying fate and the Dark Prince with every step. Some Harlequins take it a step further. These are the Solitaires, Harlequins who walk the path of damnation. They don't just fight chaos, they embody it. In Harlequin performances, the darkest roles, especially the part of Slaanesh, are reserved for a Solitaire, if one is present. During the Siege of Terra, one even played the role of the Emperor himself, the Dark King, in a secret performance witnessed by Eldar seers. Solitaires are terrifyingly powerful, but they're also cursed, their souls being promised to Slaanesh. No one speaks to them, no one touches them, they are completely alone. But even in death, their fate isn't sealed. When a Solitaire fails, Kygarak personally challenges Slaanesh for their soul, and so far, using his trademark trickery, he has always gotten the last laugh. Genestealer cults exist on countless worlds across the galaxy, quietly building rings of dissidents and saboteurs in the shadows. To their members, the Tyranids are the Star Children, divine saviors who will liberate them from oppression, and each group of cultists are preparing for the day of ascension when the cult rises up and welcomes their gods with open arms. But the truth is darker. When the Tyranids arrive, they don't find resistance. They find entire planets thrown into confusion by civil war or cultist sabotage. And if there's still fighting to be done, the hive mind takes direct control, puppeteering the cult with terrifying efficiency. Years and years of genetic mixing with Tyranid stock makes them just as susceptible to the hive mind as other bioforms. And then it ends. Once victory is assured, the hive mind abandons its tools. The cultists, once blessed with divine visions and purpose, realize the truth. They were never chosen. They were meat. Some go mad, a few try to flee, but those who escape only ever live long enough to start the cycle all over again on some other planet. The Genestealer cults aren't just infiltrators, they are victims. Just a single part of the Tyranid hunting strategy, and doomed to be devoured right alongside the rest of their worlds. Ever wonder why Space Marine sergeants wear red helmets? Well, back during the Great Crusade, an Ultramarine named Eonid Thiel had an idea. What if the Astartes trained to fight other Space Marines? After all, the superhuman warriors of the Imperium were some of the most deadly soldiers in the galaxy. But his superiors were not fans. The idea that Space Marines would ever need to know how to fight one another was so shocking that Thiel was censured, stripped of status, and forced to wear a red helmet as a mark of shame. Then, the Horus heresy happened, and suddenly Thiel's heretical drills looked like a great idea. He fought with distinction, and the red helmet became a mark of honor instead. Ultramarine sergeants started wearing it as a reminder of Thiel's foresight, and the tradition spread. Ordo was one of the Emperor's closest allies during the Dark Age of technology, a scientist, a psyker, and a perpetual. Most importantly, she helped create the Primarchs, genetically engineered warlords designed to lead humanity into a new golden age. Ordo and the Emperor created them using their own genetic material and some slight warp trickery, but that's another story. Ordo grew to think of the Primarchs as her children, and when she saw what the Emperor really had intended for them, how he planned to use them to conquer the galaxy in his name, she realized that her children would probably not grow to be well-rounded people if she did nothing. So, Ordo made a choice. she sabotaged the project and scattered the primarchs across the galaxy using warp portals, not to destroy them, but to save them, hoping that if they were raised among ordinary people, they'd grow up with empathy and humanity. It didn't work. The warp twisted her plan, and chaos touched many of the primarchs before the Emperor could reach them. The Master of Mankind was more than a little upset, but he couldn't bring himself to do more than banish Urda to a small settlement on Terra, where she stayed until everyone's favorite bad guy, Erebus, showed up to finish her off with the help of some greater demons. Orks really love their guns, but none of them hold a candle to war boss Grizguts. Just like every other war boss in existence, Grizguts had built up a huge Waaagh, with the purpose of stomping around in the Morlock system, looking for some really good fights. With all the preparations made, the Green Tide leapt into the warp for what should have been a brief jump. But through some random chance caused by either the nature of the warp itself, or by the ramshackle orcish jump technology, Grizguts and most of his boys found themselves back in yesterday, just before the Waaagh had departed. There were suddenly 2 of everything. 2 of every cruiser, rock, knob, tank, and of course, 2 of Warboss Grizguts. Honestly, this whole situation was probably a little too confusing for any orc, so it's not surprising that the Warboss from tomorrow decided to focus on something easy to understand. The Grizguts from yesterday had a copy of his favorite gun. Yeah, you guessed it, the notoriously sticky-fingered Warboss killed his very surprised alternate self and took his gun so he could have 2 of his favorite Daka slingers. The nature of time travel in 40k meant that the lucky Warboss didn't end up on the wrong end of a paradox, but it did cause a lot of confusion in his now much bigger Waaagh, and Grizguts had to spend more time whipping all his boys back into line again before he could set out. Ever notice those metal studs on a Space Marine's forehead? They're called service studs, each one marking a specific amount of time of active duty depending on material used. They're usually given to mark 10, 50, and 100 years of service, with different chapters using different materials and shapes to signify the difference. For instance, a Dark Angel's Battle Brother could have a silver stud indicating 50 years of service, and a gold stud meaning a further 100 years beyond that. Most humans would be long dead by the time they earn one, but Astartes can easily earn 5 and still not be the oldest in their squad. And even though it's probably the most 40k method of showing your veterancy, it's been falling more and more out of favor. I guess this new generation of Space Marines don't feel like getting a bolt in the head just for the bragging rights. Thanks to a mutation in their osmedulla, the organ responsible for regulating a Space Marine's superhuman bone growth, the Astartes of the Black Dragons chapter don't stop growing. Even after their transformation into Astartes is complete, their bones just keep mutating. The results are thick blade-like growths which erupt from their forearms and skulls, natural weapons strong enough to punch through power armor. And while this dramatic mutation would normally be purged, the Black Dragons lean in. They coat their bone blades in adamantium, forge them into weapons, and deploy Dragonclaw assault squads, Marines who fight with nothing but their bladed limbs. Their apothecaries even accelerate the mutations, treating the bone growths like holy gifts from the Emperor. But just because the dragons are happy with this bony boon doesn't mean other chapters are okay with it. The Dark Angels and Marines Malevolent, for instance, flat out refuse to serve beside them. The Adeptus Mechanicus does check their gene seed regularly, but strangely there have been no signs of corruption so far, leading to rumors that perhaps the Black Dragons have been stealing healthy gene seed to keep the Imperial authorities off their backs. Every Astartes is surgically rebuilt with a series of new organs, each one granting unique advantages in battle, but few are as unsettling as the Omophagea, also known as the Remembrancer. This organ is attached to the spine and connects the stomach directly to the brain via 4 nerve bundles. This allows a Space Marine to absorb memories, skills, and experiences by consuming the flesh of another creature, usually the brain or nervous tissue. It's not perfect and it's not pleasant, but it works. After a battle, a Marine might snack on a bit of dead enemy, not because they're hungry, but for intelligence. The Omophagea can then extract useful fragments, patrol routes, battle plans, or the location of an enemy hideout. Most of the time, it's just recent surface or personal memories, conversations, fears, traumas, anything that might give the Astartes an edge. It's a brutal ability, unreliable at times and deeply disturbing to outsiders, but to the Adeptus Astartes, it's just another tool. And while most Marines can use the Omophagea, not all chapters do. The practice is far more common among brutal or pragmatic forces like the Flesh Terrors, the Blood Drinkers, or the Carcharodons. Even without their advanced armor, the average Space Marine is almost unkillable thanks to the secondary heart and the Laraman's organs that support it, as well as the multi-lung, an extra respiratory organ wired directly into the chest cavity. The secondary heart is more than just backup. Sure, it acts as a redundant pump, kicking in instantly if the primary heart is destroyed, but it can also support normal cardiac function under stress, letting a Marine run faster, fight longer, and shrug off wounds that would kill a normal warrior. Combine that with the super fast clotting Laraman cells provided by the Laraman's organ, and you get a soldier that can survive losing their heart and basically can't bleed out. As for the lungs, every Astartes is given a third. The multi-lung is a biological rebreather. It allows a Space Marine to breathe in toxic or underwater environments, filter out gas attacks, and survive in low oxygen voids where even a rebreather would fail. When paired with the rest of the Astartes biology, and you wrap the whole thing in power armor, you get a warrior that simply refuses to die.
Like many other large organizations, the Imperial Navy and their associated merchants and rogue trader vessels require a lot of expendable labor to run their ships properly. Things are manual as much as possible to avoid leaning on temperamental machine spirits, and so that means a lot of the worst jobs on a ship have to be done by crew like the Astartes chapter serfs. But being a naval bondsman is just so much worse. First off, most bondsmen are press ganged. That is, they are stolen from their homes whenever a Navy ship comes into port. There are some who volunteer for this work as a way to get off-world, but not many, as it is very dangerous. Working in and around scalding hot or deadly cold working machinery is bad enough, but the hazards of traveling through space and the warp are just astronomical, especially considering that the areas of the ship where bondsmen do most of their work tend to be the least shielded, as they are expendable, places like the aforementioned septic systems. The real danger of working on a ship, though, is the radiation. Many bondsmen are conscripted to do maintenance and such, and if they are lucky, they'll be doing that anywhere but the engine room. But for the unlucky ones, the heat and radiation of a ship's glowing fusion heart are where they will be spending their last painful days in the Emperor's sight. Sure, crewing the macro cannon gun decks is almost certain death, but that's just the usual sort, the kind that comes from getting mangled by a gun carriage or blown into space during a battle. That is the nice way to go. For bondsmen working the engines, there's a much more gruesome way to die. Those of you with weak stomachs should skip the next section. Whenever these engines, and more specifically the warp drives, need refueling, it's the task of a team of bondsmen to do it. Why? Well, we're sure the tech priest would say it's because the dexterity needed to work the mechanisms involved in the process requires a thinking human, but, well, that's probably just traditionalism talking. Dressed in suits made of woven lead and other shielding metals, the team of specially selected bondsmen enter an airless chamber in the heart of the ship's service decks. Air is let in momentarily as they enter, carrying huge metal caskets which hold the dangerous fuel needed to run the warp engines. Each person on this refueling team are fitted with valves and augmetics across their faces and bodies, each of which are attached to hoses and lines leading back to safety. These are not for air, but we'll get to that. As the team of bondsmen stumble forwards, their flesh begins to sizzle and melt, as does the material of their suits. Whatever is used to power those engines evidently being so toxic or perhaps radioactive that it simply begins disintegrating the team of refuelers. But even though they are literally falling apart, they keep moving forwards, and it's here that the purpose of those valves, hoses, and lines becomes clear. The bondsmen could never complete their task if they felt pain, and so they are constantly pumped with increasing amounts of pain suppressants and stimulants to push them just far enough to reach their goals. And so this nightmare continues while the tech priests chant their blessings and the ship's captain says a thankful prayer for the sacrifice of the people, slowly being reduced to walking skeletons as they push the fuel caskets into the warp drive column and finally turn to sludge on the deck. But in the most massive hive cities dotted across the Imperium, waste treatment facilities are truly gigantic, housing whole lakes, seas of sludge, and it's not just human waste, if that makes you feel any better, but animal waste and industrial runoff as well. All of this must be taken care of, and the facilities that do that require maintenance. Understandably, and fortunately for us, Not much has been written on this particular topic, and so we'll just let this stand in our imaginations as the very worst job the Imperium has to offer, and move on.
As we said at the top of this video, 40k has been around so long that it has gone through several eras of artistic design, which has led to a truly confusing web of stories and factoids that may or may not be true in the setting. From its humble beginnings to the epic storytelling empire that it has become, investigating these facts is like being a lore-based archaeologist. And as usual, these are just a bunch of our favorite parts of the 40k lore. But what about yours? Get into the comments and share some of the most unhinged 40k facts that you know, and while you're there, why not give us a like and subscribe so that you can continue to enjoy more lore. And if you'd like to take it a step further and help us make more and better videos, consider joining as a member. You also will now get early access to members-only videos.